Okay, hello everybody. My name's Cristiane and I'm an exercise physiologist with Simply Health Solutions. Today I'm going to be talking about balance as part of my balance series. It's always a huge topic, very, very important. A lot of discussion about falls prevention and how do we kind of maintain our balance. And originally this was going to be just a one lecture, and then I kind of realized how much there actually is involved in balance, and so I kind of split it up. So for today, we're going to be talking about the core. So something that comes up a lot with seniors is this idea of having a fall. I also work in home health, so I work with people who are in their homes. And this is a really big topic about how do we keep people from falling? And even if they fall, how do we keep them safe? So it is a very stressful thing and something that a lot of people do worry about. But the thing is, there are actually various different exercises that can help. I had this one client who was late 90s and had a fall, had injured herself. And so I was there to help her kind of restore her balance and get back to kind of her usual self. And she was very motivated, really wanted to do her exercise, really tried really hard, and actually is now able, like I said, in her late 90s to be able to stand up, get down to the ground, and get up without using any chairs or any support, and she feels very balanced in that. And so I've worked with a couple of people where kind of maintaining that balance, and you'd be surprised kind of what your body can do. But then the big question is, how do we get started? Because there's so many different things, there's so much information out there. Even for myself in the industry, it's still like there's tons of information out there. And so it's sometimes hard to figure out where to get started. So I wanted to start with talking about the core. So for this section, I'm going to be talking about what is the core, how to activate it, and a couple of common exercises that can be really helpful. Just a quick, note, just be sure that whenever you are practicing any sort of new exercises, you do maybe want to check in with your doctor or an exercise professional if you do have, especially if you have any sort of specific healthcare concerns. So you just want to make sure that you are being safe when you are exercising. So the core is something that people talk about all the time. And even, like I said, even within my industry, within professionals, there's still a little bit of debate as to how best to train the core and kind of what we should be working on. But as a general kind of thing, the core is basically just the center of your body. If anybody's kind of a fan of physics, it's kind of that's usually it's your center of gravity. Not always, but usually. And so just kind of that center part of your body. And it involves the muscles of your trunk. So kind of again, that kind of core area. There are various muscles involved. There's muscles in the front, the back, the top, the bottom, and even on the sides. So there's kind of a bunch of stuff going on in there. And a part of the debate with balance training and core training is some people talk about, targeting those individual muscles, whereas other people talk about just focusing on general strengthening of the core. But the core essentially helps to keep you upright and stable. This one professor that I'll be talking about a bit later, he talks about people who have this issue with maybe they have some paralysis in some of their core muscles. They actually have a very hard time maintaining balance. So those core muscles are actually really important for us to stay upright, stable, and balanced. So it's hard to work on a balance program, let's say for your feet or your legs, your arms, or your neck, if we haven't focused on the core. It also helps to protect your spine. So a lot of people who have back injuries, we have to start at this core training. And for many who know my story, that's actually how I got into this field in the first place, is I hurt my back and found out about core training, found out about back strengthening, to help with back pain. So that's actually how I kind of learned about the field and got so interested that I'm in helping other people resolve those same issues. It's also the interesting thing is it's active most of the time. So you have different muscles in your body that are built differently. You have certain muscles that are really good at kind of giving 100% effort and then they relax, and then 100% effort and relax, or are just good at like, okay, you hold them and then they need that relaxation. The core muscles is kind of interesting because they are built to kind of be contracting a little bit kind of throughout the day, not necessarily kind of off and on, but kind of that almost like a dimmer switch, if you think of light switch. And it's that idea of not 100% and not zero, but we kind of want that nice little 20%, 30%, depending on what you're doing, right? A little bit of activation kind of throughout the day. And when it comes to the spine, the interesting thing is you want to have a bit of a balance between flexibility and stability. Usually, for pretty much all our joints, our bodies have kind of made that decision. Do we really want a really stable joint or do we want a flexible joint? So, for example, we have our knees that are very, very stable. They only go in the one direction, they don't really go too far. If we accidentally injure ourselves and they go too far, knees are not happy. So, they're made to be very stable because they need to be. Versus we have our shoulders that are made to be very, very flexible. They can kind of move in all sorts of different directions because they're made to be flexible. The spine is kind of interesting because it tries to kind of play both sides depending on what we're trying to do. So when we're not lifting anything, when we're kind of going about our day, it actually is meant to be flexible. It's meant to be kind of stretched in different positions, forwards, backwards, rotation. It is meant to be doing that. But when we're actually trying to lift something or we're trying to use the muscles in our backs, we do want it to be relatively stable. We want it to be really, really stiff so that it can actually take on the weight that we're doing. If our backs are kind of flexible and kind of bent out of shape, and then we try to lift something, that's where we can end up hurting ourselves. So in terms of how to activate the core, again, lots of different opinions, a lot of different debate out there about how exactly to activate the core, but there are a couple of key principles that a lot of people talk about. The first thing is all your muscles should work together. So a lot of times people will say it's like, well, here's how to activate this one specific muscle, this other specific muscle, but that's not usually how the core works. And actually, if you try to activate just one and not focus on the others, that one is going to get really tired. And then the other ones are kind of not even working in the background. One thing that's really helpful is kind of what we call a co-contraction, where it's kind of this turns on and then this one and then that one and then this one and then that one, so that they're actually getting rest in between, so that you don't have your whole core muscles all firing all at once and then eventually they just get so tired that they have to give in. So that's one of the ways they've kind of made it so that you can kind of contract a couple of things or kind of maintain that core stability throughout the day. So a lot of people talk about this concept of bracing. So it helps to provide that support around your core. So what you want to do is contracting all of those muscles kind of together. But like I said, not at 100%. There's just like a nice little tension to kind of keep you going. And I always think of it, it's like you're creating a nice little corset kind of around your core and around your trunk. And one cue that I always think, even before getting into the nitty-gritty, is just remembering to sit tall. I had this one professor who always talked about, imagine you have a balloon that's kind of just holding you up. So there's nothing kind of forcing you, right? You're not rigid. You're not just trying to absolutely stick everything together and be just this stick that like does not move. But again, just think of it as a balloon that's just kind of holding you up rather than all of that stress all at once. So, Dr. Stuart McGill he talks about this concept of super stiffness in terms of when we want to actually be using our backs to lift something or just maintain posture. It's that idea of keeping that back relatively stiff and stable. So I came up with a couple of different cues that you can think of when you're sitting, and just a couple of things to keep in mind when you are trying to just check and see, am I stable? So the first thing is, if we start from the bottom. So again, the core, we've got the top, the bottom, front, the back, and a bit of the sides as well. When it comes to the bottom, think of it, if you're sitting on a chair right now, think of it, just kind of rock your hips, just kind of back and forth. Do you notice that there's this little bone that kind of starts to stick in, kind of poke at your chair underneath you? Those are kind of your hip bones. Some people call them bum bones. But you kind of want to feel that under you. Might feel it differently if you're on a really soft chair, if you're on a couch. But if you're on a bit of a harder chair, you'll kind of feel it under you. So whenever you're trying to maintain your balance, you kind of want to be feeling those bones underneath you. The other thing is also what we call the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor is basically a series of muscles that are on the bottom of your hip that help to maintain your core from the bottom. And the most common cue that most people think of is, imagine you're trying to hold in your urine. Like you need to pee, not urgently. So again, we're not clenching, but it's just kind of that, like, okay, I'm starting to feel it, but the bathroom's a little bit far, so I just gotta hold it in a little bit. So again, just that kind of nice, gentle contraction, 20, 30%. And you can kind of play around with it, where it's just try that 100%, and then 0, and then 100, and then just kind of play around with that, kind of try to find that 20%. Then we've got the front. So kind of the front muscles, most common cue is just pulling in that belly button. So you can kind of put your hands kind of in front of your belly, and you're just trying to pull in that belly button a little bit. Like I said, 20%. You're not shoving it back, but it's as if you're trying to pull that belly button towards the back of your spine. Next is your back. So imagine you're right up against a wall. So if you're right up against your chair, well, that's a little bit kind of cheating if you are working on your balance. So you do kind of want to pretend you are kind of right up against a wall, right up against the back of your chair, and then just feel the fact that, like, you do feel those muscles working. And they are meant to be working. And like I said, we're not completely stiffing. This is not 100%, but it's just enough that you can feel it. You can feel it working. And then lastly, so thinking about all these different things, your bum bone, holding in your urine, your belly button, your back. Now try to make sure you can actually breathe in this position. Because a lot of people will focus on their core and they do really, really well. But the second they go to take a breath, the whole thing collapses. So it's learning how to take nice deep breaths. Doesn't have to be anything major, but just nice deep breaths and relaxing breaths while you're maintaining your position, so that it's not every time you take a breath, like I said, the whole thing collapses. So it takes some practice. It definitely is not something that comes absolutely natural, because especially these deeper muscles, our brains haven't really been thinking about exactly how to focus on this, right? If this is not something you've worked on for a long time, unless you maybe have a history of, maybe you've gone to Pilates, yoga, I think Tai Chi, I believe a little bit. They do talk about that core and that core training. Now, to kind of step it up a little, what you can try to do is to do some marching while keeping that posture. So maybe at the beginning, you're just starting with your legs, right? And just trying to make sure, especially those bum bones, right? Make sure you still feel them kind of underneath you. That back, is that back still nice and straight? Because especially with the marching, your back wants to start tilting back. So it's just nice and tall. And, if you want to add something, you can add the arms too, right? And just making sure we are sitting upright. Don't let your low back curl. And you should feel, like I said, feel those lower hip bones kind of throughout the marching. I like using that just as a cue in, balance programs that I've taught in the past. It's, throughout the exercise class, I was like, okay, are you feeling that underneath you? And then I see everybody in the class. Oh, okay. No, no, no. I've forgotten that. Let me go back. So those are kind of just in terms of activating the core, making sure that it is stable and nice and tall. Because if you try to start going into the more fancy, the more kind of um, trickier core exercises without working on the basics, then you could almost end up hurting yourself if you're not really focused on what it is you're trying to actually achieve. So I spoke about Dr. Stuart McGill, and he's actually a really, really big researcher in the low back pain, core stability, spine health field. He's over, I believe, at Western. I believe he teaches over at Western University. And he's been researching low back pain and treatments for over 30 years. He's actually got a couple of different books. And they can actually be really, really helpful if anybody is kind of dealing with low back pain. But he talks about there are 3 basic core exercises for core stability that he really, really recommends, and to kind of start from there. And then you can build. And there are ways that you can make it harder. But as I'll talk about today, there are ways to also make it easier. The first one is what he calls the modified curl up. I usually just refer to it as the McGill curl up. So a lot of people, especially whenever people think of getting active, they always sit-ups tends to be one of those first exercises that we think of. But an actual sit-up when you're coming all the way up is actually pretty rough on your low back. You don't really want to be doing that just because there's a lot of back mechanics involved, and it just essentially it'll start changing the way your back works and where you can wind up with a little bit of pain. So he talks about the modified curl up, which is really just the first little bit of that sit up. And what he talks about is making sure you have your hands kind of behind your back. So I think of this, you can do this on the floor, but I know a lot of people really struggle to get down to the floor. So if you have a decently hard mattress, you can try it on your mattress. Just making sure you're not sinking into the mattress. So you kind of have to see if it works for you. And then again, if or for some people, if you've got sore shoulders, this might be a little rough on the shoulders. So again, just modify as necessary. But what Stuart McGill talks about is you have your hands kind of in that little low back. So even right now while you're sitting, if you just kind of put your hands on your back, you might notice just a little curve that goes inwards in your low back. And especially for those who maybe have a lot of back pain, maybe that curve isn't a very, very pronounced curve, but it's just you kind of want that little curve there. And if you do have some shoulder issues, you could grab just a little towel, a little dish towel, curl it up, and just put it under your back. It's not meant to hold your low back up. It's actually just meant to show you if you are flattening that curve. And essentially, once you're in that curl up position, you're just going to just slightly lift back and then slight lift and back. This is going to work on those front muscles. And like I said, there are different ways you can make it harder, but this would be the first thing to kind of start with. And then you can kind of work your way up to getting a little bit more, make it a little bit harder. And one of the couple of things that I tend to see is making sure you are looking up instead of kind of what a lot of people do is they almost look like down towards their toes, but you do want that head kind of up, almost looking up to the ceiling, when you are doing this exercise. And the other thing is making sure that belly button stays down, because sometimes people have a tendency to that belly button kind of pops up, and you do kind of want it doesn't have to be sucked in, but you just don't want it popping out, because then that just means you're activating the wrong muscles. And then if you do that repeatedly, it can kind of cause problems down the road. So you do want to be kind of mindful of that. So that's the first kind of McGill curl up. Then we have the side plank, and I will be talking about a modification afterwards. But the side plank is now working on the side muscles. So what this essentially you'd be doing is you're laying down on the floor and you're just making sure that everything is lined up. If you're new to this, I almost recommend going right up against the wall and having the wall behind you, because you want to make sure that your shoulders not kind of way out here, your hips way back here, your knees are over there. You want to make sure you're in a nice lined up position, and then you just slowly lift the hips. And if having the legs straight is too much, you can have the knees bent and then just kind of lift that hip and down, lift and down. So it's just kind of strengthening that side muscle. And like I said, there's a modification. You can do this up against the wall while you're standing. Because like I said, a lot of people, if you've got sore shoulders or if you're just worried about coming down to the ground, just kind of going up against the wall and just supporting yourself that way. And as you get better and better at it, bring your feet a little bit further and further away from that wall so that there is more of a challenge on those side muscles. You do want to make sure that you're wearing really good shoes. You got good grip on the ground, so that your feet don't slide out from under you if you get too far, or if you're on like a area rug or like a little carpet, you want to make sure that carpet doesn't slide out from under you. And like I said, you just want to be standing nice and tall and nice and straight so that your back isn't curved. That's going to be the side plank, which can be really, really helpful. And then lastly is his exercise known as the bird dog. This is actually really, really challenging. Might look easy once you can get down to the ground, but it actually is quite challenging to make sure you're doing everything correctly. And essentially what you'd be doing is you get down on the floor, hands and knees, making sure your hands are kind of under your shoulders, that they're not way out here and that they're not way under here, because it'll make it more difficult to actually balance. And then your knees should be kind of directly under your hips. The other thing I like to cue on people is that when you're in that position, just curving the back and then flatten as far down as you can, curve and flatten, just so you can find, okay, where is it? Where's neutral, as we often say. So we're kind of that middle ground. So like the girl in the picture, you just kind of want that nice little straight back. Another thing I like to do is have people grab a nice little ball, maybe like an exercise ball. If you've got a dog's relatively large, round kind of ball, or a roll of paper towel. So something round and light. You don't want something really heavy, and you also don't want something that won't roll, but just anything like that, like a paper towel. And then you kind of put it. Let's see if I can. You kind of put it like right there, because the idea is while you're doing this exercise, if that ball starts rolling off your back, or the paper towel starts rolling off, then you know that your hips and your core is not staying stable. It's actually starting to move. So as the full bird dog exercise, you would slowly one arm and then the opposite leg start stretching out. But that is kind of, like I said, that can actually be quite challenging. The way you can start is just getting into that position and just straightening out one arm and seeing if you can maintain your core, maintain that ball or that paper towel on the back on your low back, and then coming down. Sometimes I find people are able to bring the arm out, then they kind of struggle to maintain that core on the way down. Same thing with the leg. So you're getting into that position, you straighten out the leg, keep that ball and that paper towel behind you, and then slowly slide it back. Again, people I find do relatively well bringing the leg out, struggle to bring it back in. And it's just, you do as many as you feel comfortable doing. The important thing is more that you're doing it correctly rather than trying to do a bunch of repetitions all at once. I find sometimes people, they try to do, 10, 20, 30, but if you're not doing it correctly, your body's going to learn that motor pattern in that specific way, and then it's harder to untrain the things you've currently learned. Like I think of me and driving when I went to go for my driver's test, it's that idea of there are certain habits that I've developed, and so being at the driving test, like, oh, right, I've got to get rid of this habit that I've developed over the past couple of years of driving. And so nice and slow, nice and focused. Another thing that I've had even just other therapists recommend is you could maybe try recording yourself, record a video, take your phone, computer, just anything, and just record yourself and see, like, do I look like I'm staying stable? Or if you have a mirror, right? Or if you have a friend or a partner that can kind of take a look for you, you can do that too. There's tons of different ways you can modify it. And then for those who are kind of worried. Oh, can't I? Oh, there we go. There we go. So, and then for the modified bird dog, so for those who are worried about getting down to the ground, there is one where you can do it at a table or at a counter. I always recommend if you're gonna do this on a chair or a table, have it right up against the wall because you want to make sure that table is not gonna slide out from under you. Because I have seen the occasional case where somebody they put all their weight on that chair or that table, but it's a light table and doesn't have a good grip, and it starts to slowly slide out from under them. So I always say, tack it right up against the wall so that you know it's not going anywhere. And the idea is, again, checking the core, making sure, am I sitting up nice and tall? My back, my hips, my shoulders, right? Is everything kind of nicely lined up? And then you bring those feet a little bit further back, similar to the side plank. The further out you are, the more of an angle you are, the harder it's going to be. So maybe just start up real close and then just raise that arm, raise the other arm, raise one leg, raise the other leg. So it's that idea of you're maintaining that core while everything else is moving. And that's actually, for those who are familiar with Pilates, that's kind of the basic concept of Pilates, is making sure that the core stays nice and stable while you're moving, your arms and your legs, and making sure that you are working on that stability. There are also a common couple of stretches for balance and core, and also making sure we are getting that flexibility. Because like I said, the spine is not made to be 100% stable or 100% flexible. It kind of needs a bit of both. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, because they either go into the camp of, I need to keep it completely straight at all times. I can't let it move. And if I let it move, then I'm going to hurt my back. There's that side. But then there's the people who are so flexible, don't really think about it. Every time they lift something, their backs start hurting, right? And it's finding that middle ground. Not too much on the stability side, but not too much on the flexibility. So this is actually one of my favorite exercises that you can do on the floor or on your bed. Like I said, unless it's like really, really soft, or if you find your bed, like you really kind of swoop in kind of in the center, but it's just sitting down on your stomach, hands by your side, or here. And for some people, if your back is in a lot of pain, that alone can actually be really, really uncomfortable. Because I still remember that when I hurt my back, just laying down on the flat floor was actually really uncomfortable. And so it was just getting my back just used to even just flattening out. That took a little bit. Once you get the hang of it, and once your back is feeling comfortable, you can get onto your elbows. And then you just kind of bring that chest up. And it's just to really kind of get a good stretch in the upper back and also in the lower back. I find that a lot of people, there is another exercise you often see in yoga pictures where people kind of are on their hands, but oftentimes when I see people do it, all of that bend is all in the low back. Like it's almost 100% their upper back is almost completely straight. Their low back is the one that's kind of experiencing all of the bend. And sometimes, depending on your condition, that's probably not what you want. And you actually want to maybe start on your elbows and really trying to get that upper back as well. And this is going to be one of the other things that can help is for people who are very kind of slouched forward. This can be a good stretch to just try to get that chest forward and trying to get that posture back. Then we have the exact opposite stretch, which is what I call knee to chest. So it's just laying down on your bed, on your floor, and just slowly you bring one knee towards you, and then you slowly bring the other knee towards you. And then you just kind of hold it. You hold it for a little bit, and then you slowly let go. Don't just let both legs go at once, because then that can cause, kind of a automatic contraction of your abs, and then everything gets a little bit tense. But you just slowly let go of one, you slowly let go of the other. And what I often find for people who have back pain, one tends to feel really good, the other one's not as comfortable. So usually, we have this idea of, is your back pain as a general category, does it feel better when you bend forward, or does it feel better when you go back? So again, you can kind of try the two different ones, and it's not that one is better than the other, but maybe for your particular condition, maybe one is just going to be more of a stretch than the other. And then the other one that's also really important is rotation. I find a lot of people forget about rotation, and it's super important. Like I said, we also want that flexibility part of our spines, not just forwards and back, but that flexibility in your back. And like most parts of our bodies, you might find that one side is way more flexible than the other side. Maybe for those who are drivers, as you might find that maybe the one you shoulder check with, because I find more people, maybe they do more on this side, more on the other side, but either way, you might notice one side might be a lot more flexible than the other side. The other thing that could be contributing to it is if you often have like a bag or a purse, you always hold it on the same side. Again, that one side might be getting more exercise than the other. If you are looking for more information, like I said, Dr. Stuart McGill, he's a really, really great resource, has tons of stuff online, but he also has several books that actually can be really, really helpful. There is Back Mechanic that he's written, I believe, quite a while ago, but it's still something that I use to this day for exercises. So you can always take a look at his website for more information. And what I always say is you'd be surprised what you can achieve with exercise. I found this picture on Stuart McGill's website of a 85-year-old man who does deadlifting and exercises. And actually, I think when he was 75, it said he had the spine of a 40-year-old because he maintained his exercises. He tries to stay active on a regular basis. So I've worked with a bunch of different people with a bunch of different conditions. And I always say, you know what? I think it's always worth a try as long as you're being safe, as long as you're not demanding too much from yourself at this particular moment, but you're setting yourself up for success. You'd be really surprised what you can achieve. And then, as always, if you ever want kind of one-on-one, if you have questions kind of specific to your health, and maybe you want to get some ideas, feel free to contact me. We can always book an appointment and I can kind of help you maybe, like I said, explore some ideas, figure out maybe there's some stuff in your community that might be really, really helpful. So we can always take a look at that. And then, as always, like I said, you can email me. My slides are found on my website, and I will be recording my lectures and posting them on YouTube.